From the very beginning of President Barack Obama's journey in the White House, the central theme that defined his administration was the pursuit of progress in the face of extraordinary challenges. When the West Wing Week 01/19/17 episode reflects on 8 years of accomplishments, it is not simply providing a checklist of policy achievements. It is capturing the emotional and historical weight of an era marked by turbulence, transformation, and a relentless belief in the power of collective action. The farewell week becomes a lens through which the public can remember just how far the country had come since January 2009, when Obama first stepped into office during a moment of deep national uncertainty. The economic recession that greeted him was the worst since the Great Depression, a financial crisis that was destroying millions of jobs, collapsing major industries, and shaking the confidence of families across the country. Yet, as Obama prepared to leave the White House 8 years later, the tone of the retrospective was one of resilience, an acknowledgement that, although challenges persisted, the country had regained stability, opportunity, and hope through a combination of smart policy, persistent effort, and a commitment to governing with empathy. The West Wing Week episode emphasizes how the administration's economic recovery efforts set the tone for nearly all that followed. The Recovery Act, controversial at the time, played a major role in helping stabilize key sectors and prevent further economic collapse. It funded infrastructure projects, supported renewable energy development, and created or saved millions of jobs. Over time, the economy began adding jobs consistently, marking one of the longest streaks of job growth in U.S. history. Unemployment dropped significantly, wages gradually improved, and consumer confidence rose. This sense of regained economic footing served not only as a statistical achievement, but as a psychological anchor for American families, many of whom had feared that the recession would permanently alter their futures. The administration's narrative was clear. Progress is possible when the government meets crises with urgency, data-driven solutions, and compassion for those most affected. Connected to this economic rebuilding was a broader vision of expanding opportunity and ensuring fairness within the system. The Affordable Care Act stands out as perhaps the most defining domestic policy achievement of Obama's presidency and receives reflection during the farewell week. The ACA was not just a legislative victory. It became a symbol of a government willing to take on long-standing inequities in the healthcare system. Before the law, millions were uninsured, people were denied coverage for pre-existing conditions, and basic health care often depended on employment status. After the law's implementation, more than 20 million people gained health insurance. Young adults were allowed to stay on their parents' plans until age 26, and lifetime caps, once a source of financial ruin for sick families, were eliminated. Through the lens of the farewell week, this accomplishment is not described as a perfect solution, but as a courageous step toward a more humane healthcare system. Obama frequently acknowledged imperfections and expressed willingness to improve the law, reinforcing his belief that progress is iterative. What mattered was that the country had moved from a place of paralysis to a place where reform was finally possible. Climate change and environmental stewardship also appear as defining features of the legacy captured in Obama's final week. During his tenure, renewable energy capacity expanded dramatically, with solar and wind power costs falling and installations multiplying nationwide. The administration doubled fuel efficiency standards for vehicles, invested heavily in clean technology, and joined global efforts to combat climate change, most notably through the Paris Agreement. For Obama, this was not only about environmental policy, it was about embracing innovation, job creation, and the responsibility to preserve the planet for future generations. The farewell reflections highlight how the administration approached climate action with a sense of urgency grounded in scientific consensus. It also underscores the difficulty of pursuing such ambitious goals in the face of political polarization, reminding viewers that progress often requires pushing through resistance and believing in long-term benefits even when the short-term politics are challenging. Civil rights and social progress form another major pillar of the accomplishments emphasized in the farewell week. During Obama's tenure, significant strides were made in LGBTQ+ rights, particularly with the nationwide legalization of same-sex marriage. The administration also took steps to address long-standing racial disparities in the justice system, pushing for sentencing reform, supporting community policing initiatives, and advocating for rehabilitation over blanket incarceration. The repeal of Don't Ask, Don't Tell allowed LGBTQ+ individuals to serve openly in the military, marking a historic shift in military culture. These achievements reflect an underlying theme of Obama's presidency: the belief that America's moral arc bends toward justice when individuals and institutions commit to fairness and dignity. The farewell reflections illustrate how these accomplishments were not isolated events but part of a broader cultural and political movement toward inclusion. A movement that, in Obama's view, required constant vigilance to protect and expand. Public service and diplomacy were also central to Obama's vision of American leadership, and the farewell week highlights achievements that reshaped global relations. The administration ended the U.S. military presence in Iraq, prioritized international cooperation, negotiated the Iran nuclear deal, worked to restore diplomatic relations with Cuba, and pursued strategies that combined military precision with multilateral engagement. These actions reflected a belief in diplomacy as a powerful tool of national security. Obama's approach aimed to demonstrate that global challenges such as nuclear proliferation, terrorism, and climate change could not be solved through unilateral action alone. The farewell retrospective underscores his philosophy that American leadership is strongest when it inspires, collaborates, and sets an example consistent with democratic values. Education and opportunity for young people also stand out as defining legacies of the Obama era, and the farewell week carries emotional reflections on programs like Pell Grant expansions, student loan reforms, and initiatives promoting science, technology, engineering, and mathematics education. Programs like My Brother's Keeper, which aimed to support young men of color, and efforts to improve community colleges underscore the administration's belief that empowering youth is essential to national progress. For Obama, education was not only a policy objective, but a deeply personal mission shaped by his own experiences. His encouragement to students, telling them that their potential mattered, that their voices mattered, and that their effort could shape the country, became a hallmark of his presidency and is echoed in the tone of the farewell week's narrative. Healthcare, climate, economic recovery, civil rights, diplomacy, and education were all major achievements, but the farewell week also emphasized quieter, less publicized successes that shaped everyday life in the country. New consumer protections were implemented to prevent predatory financial practices. The auto industry was saved from collapse, protecting millions of jobs. Investments in broadband and expanded digital access to rural and underserved communities. Nutrition standards for school lunches improved, veterans' benefits were strengthened, and new policies supported military families in meaningful ways. Even areas like cybersecurity and digital modernization, topics often overlooked by the general public, were advanced under Obama's leadership. These achievements reveal a presidency focused not only on headline reforms, but on the practical details that affect daily life. Perhaps the most powerful theme reflected in the farewell week is Obama's consistent message of hope and civic engagement. His presidency was marked by an encouragement of community action, volunteerism, and faith in democratic institutions. Even during moments of national difficulty, including mass shootings, racial tensions, political polarization, and international crises. Obama urged Americans not to give in to cynicism. He often described democracy as a task requiring constant participation, reminding citizens that change occurs when individuals are willing to work hard, listen to each other, and build coalitions across differences. The farewell reflections amplify this message, capturing the emotional resonance of a leader who believed deeply in the potential of ordinary people to do extraordinary things. The farewell week also encourages viewers to understand that progress is rarely linear. Obama frequently acknowledged that not all goals were achieved, and that some achievements would face opposition or attempts at reversal. Yet he framed progress as a long-term project, one that spans generations rather than administrations. His emphasis was on building momentum, shifting norms, and laying a foundation for future leaders and citizens to continue the work. This sense of humility, combined with confidence in the American people, shaped his legacy as much as any specific policy. Another dimension emphasized in the farewell reflections is the personal nature of leadership. Obama's presidency was characterized by a calm, deliberate demeanor that often contrasted sharply with the chaotic political climate around him. His style of decision-making was analytical yet empathetic, rooted in listening to experts, weighing complex options, and considering the human impact of policies. The farewell week showcases glimpses of this leadership style through behind-the-scenes footage, interactions with staff, and small moments that reveal his character. These glimpses help viewers understand not only what he accomplished, but how he approached the responsibility of governing, through patience, discipline, and a belief in treating people with respect. The farewell week also offers a sense of closure. It allows the public to appreciate the full arc of Obama's journey, from a young senator with an unlikely path to the presidency, to a leader who navigated some of the toughest challenges in modern history, to a departing president offering gratitude, reflection, and a final call to action. It shows how his administration left a structural, cultural, and emotional impact on the nation. The accomplishments highlighted in this retrospective are not simply policy outcomes. They reflect a broader vision for what America can be when it chooses unity over division, compassion over indifference, and possibility over fear. Ultimately, the expanded view of Key Point 1 reveals that the farewell reflections serve both as a celebration and a reminder. They celebrate the tangible achievements of 8 years: economic recovery, healthcare reform, climate action, civil rights progress, diplomatic breakthroughs, and educational expansion. But they also remind the nation of the deeper principles that guided those achievements: hope, resilience, empathy, justice, and the belief that America's story is always being written by those willing to work for a better future. In that sense, Obama's farewell is not merely a concluding chapter. It is an invitation for the next generation to continue shaping the narrative with courage and purpose. As West Wing Week 01/19/17 moves through the final days of the Obama presidency, one of the most powerful themes that emerges is the profound sense of gratitude, reflection, and emotional closure that defined the last moments inside the White House. This was not simply a routine end-of-term farewell. It was a deeply human transition marked by heartfelt exchanges, memories shared between colleagues, and the realization that the administration's journey had touched millions of lives in far more intimate ways than statistics or speeches could ever convey. What stands out in these final days is not only President Obama's public farewell address or official goodbyes, but also the private interactions between him, the First Lady, and the countless staff members who dedicated themselves to the mission of the presidency. Every hallway handshake, every hug in the West Wing, and every moment spent reflecting on the past 8 years became infused with a sense of history, emotion, and appreciation for the people who made those years possible. From the moment Obama first stepped into the White House in 2009, he recognized that the presidency was not a solo endeavor. It was a collective effort carried out by thousands of individuals, advisors, service staff, Secret Service agents, military personnel, policy experts, custodians, chefs, and countless others, whose work often went unseen by the public, but was essential to the functioning of the nation's highest office. The farewell week of January 2017 became a tribute to these people. The episode captures scenes of the president thanking long-serving staff members, many of whom had been at the White House through multiple administrations and had built personal connections with the Obama family. These interactions reflect a culture of mutual respect that Obama and the First Lady worked hard to cultivate. They believed that every person in the White House, regardless of role or rank, contributed to the dignity and success of the institution. As the end approached, that belief manifested in emotional exchanges where staff members expressed gratitude, not just for the opportunity to serve, but for the way they were treated throughout the administration. The farewell address itself highlighted this theme of gratitude, but the raw emotion surrounding it was best seen behind the scenes. In private conversations with his team, Obama often reminded them that their efforts had made a tangible difference in people's lives, from families who could finally afford health care to young dreamers who felt seen and valued by the country they called home. Staff members, many of whom worked long hours under high pressure, found themselves deeply moved by those words. They understood that their sacrifices, often invisible to the public, were recognized at the highest level. Many spoke about how working under Obama had shaped their values, strengthened their commitment to public service, and given them a sense of purpose that would follow them long after leaving the White House. This connection between leader and team is a defining aspect of the farewell week, revealing the emotional depth of their shared journey. Equally emotional were the moments involving the First Lady, Michelle Obama, who had become an inspiring figure in her own right. Her farewell speech, delivered a few days before the episode, left many viewers teary-eyed as she expressed her love for young people, military families, and educators, communities she championed tirelessly for 8 years. In the final West Wing Week episode, staff interactions with Michelle highlight her warmth, humility, and motherly presence within the White House. She was not simply a ceremonial figure. She was a mentor and a role model whose authenticity touched everyone around her. Many staff members recalled how she made an effort to learn their names, ask about their families, and acknowledge their contributions. Her parting words to them emphasized gratitude, resilience, and the importance of continuing to uplift others, reinforcing the sense that the emotional heart of the White House was leaving along with her. One of the most moving elements of the farewell week was how the Obama family interacted with the permanent White House staff, the butlers, ushers, housekeepers, florists, and maintenance workers whose lives unfold largely behind the scenes. These individuals serve every president, yet they often form particularly close bonds with first families. Over 8 years, they watched the Obama daughters grow from children into young women. They participated in holiday traditions, shared quiet moments, and helped maintain a sense of normalcy in a place defined by constant political pressure. When the Obamas packed their belongings and prepared to leave, the emotions felt by these long-serving staff members were genuine and profound. Some cried openly, not because they were losing a job, they would continue serving the next first family, but because they were saying goodbye to people they considered extended family. The episode captures the sincerity of these relationships, reminding viewers that the White House is not simply a government building. It is a home filled with human stories and emotional bonds that transcend politics. In the wider public sphere, millions of Americans expressed their farewell messages through letters, videos, and social media. Many of these messages found their way into the White House during those final days, and staff members spent hours sorting through the massive volume of correspondence. People shared how Obama's presidency had given them hope during difficult moments, how it had inspired them to become more active in their communities, or how his empathy during national tragedies had comforted them. Veterans wrote about improved access to care. Students wrote about receiving Pell Grants. Young members of the LGBTQ+ community wrote about feeling recognized and protected, and immigrants wrote about being treated with dignity. These personal testimonies formed a mosaic of gratitude that offered a counterpoint to the political tensions of the moment. They underscored the emotional connection Obama had forged with people from all walks of life through his authenticity and compassion. Inside the White House, the atmosphere during Farewell Week was a mixture of nostalgia, pride, sadness, and quiet reflection. Staff members who had grown accustomed to the pace and intensity of governing now grappled with the realization that their time in this historic space was ending. Offices were packed up, personal notes were exchanged, and last-minute tasks were completed with a sense of finality. The episode captures small but meaningful scenes: a staffer taking one last walk through the Rose Garden, another snapping a photo of the Oval Office before leaving, and groups gathering to share memories of long nights, crisis meetings, legislative battles, and personal jokes that had lightened the heaviest days. These moments reveal the humanity behind the machinery of government. They show that even in one of the most high-pressure workplaces in the world, people form friendships, support each other, and build emotional connections shaped by both triumph and hardship. One of the most poignant traditions during a presidential farewell is the signing of personal letters to staff members who worked closely with the first family. These letters are not public documents, but deeply personal messages that express gratitude for loyalty, sacrifice, and dedication. Obama and the First Lady wrote many such letters in their final days, often taking extra time to personalize them. For staff who had spent years rarely receiving public recognition for their efforts, these letters became cherished mementos, symbols of appreciation that validated their long hours, sleepless nights, and personal sacrifices. The episode hints at these intimate gestures, showing the President and First Lady carving out time amid their busy schedule to ensure that people felt valued as the chapter closed. Emotion also permeated the rituals of departure. Moments like the final walk through the West Wing corridors, the last ride in the presidential motorcade, and the final wave from the South Lawn. These scenes resonate because they remind viewers of the humanity behind the presidency. No matter how powerful the role, every president eventually becomes a departing public servant, stepping back into the life of an ordinary citizen. For Obama, who had become a symbol of hope for millions, these departures carried enormous emotional weight. He had always emphasized that the presidency was about service, not personal glory. The farewell week reflects his humility as he thanked his staff, acknowledged the support of the American people, and expressed gratitude for the opportunity to serve. The emotional exchanges captured in the episode show that this gratitude was not performative but deeply felt. Another layer of emotion in the farewell week stems from the unspoken recognition that the country was entering a new and uncertain chapter. Many staff members felt anxious about the policies and values of the incoming administration, particularly because Obama's leadership style had emphasized empathy, inclusivity, and evidence-based governance. Yet the tone of the farewell was never bitter or despairing. Instead, it was grounded in the belief that democracy is resilient because it is built on the contributions of ordinary people. Obama spoke frequently during the final days about the importance of civic engagement and the role of citizens in defending democratic institutions. His emotional goodbyes were tied to a broader message of empowerment, urging Americans to remain hopeful, active, and united even during difficult transitions. The farewell week also drew attention to the emotional toll that public service takes on families. Michelle Obama spoke candidly about the challenges of raising two children in the spotlight, enduring intense public scrutiny, and balancing personal identity with national expectations. The daughters, Malia and Sasha, who grew up under the public eye, expressed their gratitude to the staff who created a safe and supportive environment for them inside the White House. These reflections highlight the complex emotional landscape experienced by first families and underscore how gratitude becomes a powerful anchor in moments of transition. Ultimately, the emotional goodbyes captured in West Wing Week 01/19/17 are not merely sentimental, they serve as a reminder of the humanity that underlies the political process. They show that leadership is not only measured in policy achievements or political victories, but also in how a leader treats the people around him. Obama's gratitude toward his staff, his emotional connection to the American people, and the reciprocal affection he received reflect a presidency shaped by humility, empathy, and deep respect for public service. The farewell week thus becomes a powerful narrative about endings, not as moments of loss, but as opportunities to reflect on shared journeys, meaningful relationships, and the enduring impact of service carried out with honesty and heart. In the final days of the Obama administration, as captured in West Wing Week 01/19/17, the theme of a peaceful and orderly transition of power stands out not only as a constitutional requirement, but as a defining expression of democratic integrity. For President Obama, the transition was not merely a procedural formality. It was a responsibility rooted in the belief that the strength of American democracy rests on the continuity of governance, the peaceful transfer of authority, and the respect each administration must show for institutions that serve the nation. The farewell week showcases the immense behind-the-scenes efforts that ensure the outgoing administration leaves the White House prepared for its successors, regardless of political differences. It highlights the professionalism, discipline, and sense of duty that guided Obama and his team as they prepared to hand over the reins of power, even as the political climate outside was marked by tension, polarization, and profound uncertainty about the future. The transition process began long before the final week, but during those last days its intensity multiplied. Hundreds of briefings had to be completed, classified materials had to be transferred, national security protocols had to be updated, and logistical arrangements had to be finalized. Each of these tasks was essential to maintaining stability within the government, ensuring that no matter what changes came with the new administration, the foundations of national operations remained intact. The episode offers glimpses into the careful planning undertaken by staff who had devoted years of service to the country. They were determined to leave the incoming team with the tools and information needed to succeed. Obama frequently emphasized that the presidency is larger than any individual, and that every incoming administration deserves the institutional support required to fulfill its responsibilities. This belief guided him throughout the transition, shaping an atmosphere of grace and professionalism even amid political disagreements. At the heart of the peaceful transition is a symbolic yet deeply meaningful tradition: the outgoing president welcoming the incoming president to the White House. While this meeting is brief and highly formalized, it represents the continuity of democratic governance. Obama approached this tradition with the same dignity and respect that characterized his time in office. Despite the political differences between the two administrations, he made it clear that he was committed to helping ensure a smooth and effective handover. The West Wing Week episode subtly acknowledges the significance of this gesture, showing that leadership is not only about advancing one's own agenda, but about protecting the stability and reputation of the office itself. Obama's commitment to this principle underscores his belief that democracies are strongest when leaders act with institutional responsibility rather than partisan rivalry. Behind the scenes, national security played one of the most crucial roles in the transition process. Classified briefings had to be delivered to the incoming national security team, detailing global threats, military operations, intelligence assessments, and strategic partnerships. These briefings are essential for continuity, allowing the new administration to understand the complexities of global affairs and respond effectively from day one. Obama's final week included meetings with intelligence officials and military leaders to ensure that nothing was overlooked. His understanding of the presidency as a role that bears immense global responsibility drove him to prioritize the thoroughness of this process. The peaceful transition in this context was not merely a symbolic tradition, it was a protective measure for national stability. The transition also involved preparing extensive policy documentation across every federal department. Agencies produced detailed reports outlining ongoing initiatives, unresolved challenges, budgetary needs, and recommendations for the future. These documents required extraordinary coordination, covering everything from healthcare and climate policy to transportation, infrastructure, and education systems. Staff members who had spent years designing and implementing programs now had to condense their work into clear, organized briefings for their successors. The episode hints at the pressure they faced, the urgency of distilling years of experience into coherent guidance, the emotional weight of knowing their time was ending, and the sense of duty that compelled them to leave things in the best possible shape. Even those who disagreed with the incoming administration's political priorities remained committed to ensuring a functional transition. This commitment speaks to the ethos of civil service, where loyalty is not to any particular leader, but to the country as a whole. One of the most human aspects of the transition process is the emotional experience of staff members preparing to step aside for their replacements. For many, leaving the White House meant not only leaving a job, but also leaving a community, a mission, and a sense of purpose that had defined their lives for 8 years. Yet even in the midst of these personal emotions, they approached their responsibilities with professionalism. They welcomed incoming staff members, answered questions, helped them navigate the building, and guided them through complex systems. These interactions were moments of quiet grace, moments where individuals with differing political affiliations collaborated out of respect for democratic norms. The farewell week captures the poignancy of these exchanges, revealing how the peaceful transition of power depends as much on everyday people as it does on presidential leadership. The tone Obama set during the transition was one of optimism tempered by realism. He acknowledged the differences in views between the outgoing and incoming administrations, but he urged his staff and the nation to remain hopeful and steadfast in their commitment to democratic ideals. Throughout his presidency, Obama had emphasized that democracy is a collective effort and that no single administration can complete the work of progress. His message remained consistent during the transition. Citizens must stay engaged, uphold democratic values, and hold leaders accountable. This mindset shaped his approach to the transition, reminding the public that change is a fundamental part of democratic life, and the peaceful acceptance of electoral outcomes is one of the greatest strengths of the American system. The peaceful transition also extended beyond executive operations. Obama spent part of the farewell week meeting with congressional leaders, regardless of party affiliation, to ensure legislative continuity. He supported briefings between outgoing and incoming agency heads, encouraged open communication between teams, and underscored the importance of maintaining professionalism throughout the federal workforce. Although the political climate was tense, Obama's demeanor remained calm and steady. He believed that demonstrating respect during a transition was essential for modeling good governance. The final week's coverage reflects how he sought to reinforce this principle through his actions, setting an example for future leaders to follow. Another critical element of the transition was its public message. Obama understood that millions of Americans were watching closely, some feeling anxious about the future and others feeling hopeful for change. The peaceful transition served not only a practical purpose, but also a symbolic one, communicating that the nation's institutions were resilient, that democracy remained intact, and that leadership responsibilities were being handed over with dignity. In his farewell address, he reminded Americans that the strength of the country lies not in any one individual, but in the people who participate in its democratic processes. This message resonated deeply during the transition, offering reassurance to those who feared instability and inspiring confidence in the enduring framework of the Constitution. Staff members who had worked closely with Obama described the transition as a period of emotional complexity. They felt pride in their achievements, sadness at leaving, and uncertainty about the future. Yet the guiding principle of peaceful transition gave them a sense of purpose during their final days. They knew they were part of something bigger than themselves, the legacy of orderly governance that has defined the United States since its founding. The farewell week amplifies this sentiment, showing how even small tasks carried symbolic weight. A staffer cleaning out a desk, another handing over a project binder, a group organizing archived files, all of these moments contributed to continuity. They reflect a shared belief in the importance of institutional stability. The transition process also required immense logistical coordination. Moving one first family out of the White House and preparing the residence for another requires precision, timing, and teamwork. On Inauguration Day, the transformation happens within hours, and the episode touches on the behind-the-scenes efforts of residence staff who execute these tasks flawlessly. Their role in the peaceful transition is indispensable, yet often goes unnoticed by the public. The episode offers quiet recognition of their professionalism and dedication, reminding viewers that democracy is upheld by countless individuals who work tirelessly outside the spotlight. At its core, the peaceful transition showcased in West Wing Week 01/19/17 serves as a powerful testament to the endurance of American democratic values. It underscores the idea that political power is temporary, that leaders are stewards rather than rulers, and that the stability of the nation depends on the willingness of those in power to respect the electoral process. Obama's approach to the transition reflects his belief in these principles. He maintained a tone of respect, cooperation, and dignity even amid political differences, reinforcing the idea that the presidency is an institution that must be protected through responsible action. In reflecting on the transition, the farewell week becomes not just a documentation of procedural tasks, but a narrative about the integrity of governance. It illustrates how the peaceful transfer of power requires humility, grace, and a commitment to something larger than personal or partisan interests. It shows how the process strengthens civic trust, fosters stability, and sets a standard for future generations. Most importantly, it reminds viewers that the health of a democracy is measured not by moments of ease, but by how it navigates moments of change. The peaceful transition captured in this episode, meticulous, respectful, emotional, and principled, becomes a final chapter in the Obama presidency that embodies the values he championed throughout his time in office. It signals that leadership is defined not only by how one governs, but by how one leaves. And in those final days, as folders were handed over, offices were emptied, and staff embraced each other one last time, the transition became a story of continuity, resilience, and unwavering commitment to the democratic ideals that shape the nation's identity. If you'd like, I can now create SEO title, description, tags, hashtags, or keywords for the full project. You said, Key point 3: expend 3,000 words without heading, ChatGPT said. Below is a fresh, newly written 3,000 word expansion of key point 3, completely different from the previous one, with no headings, continuous narrative, deeply detailed, reflective, and rich. I will produce a long form narrative approximating 3,000 words as requested. The final week of the Obama administration, as portrayed in West Wing Week 01/19/17, centers around the profound importance of the peaceful transition of power, a cornerstone of American democracy that symbolizes the stability, resilience, and continuity of the nation's political framework. While much of the attention during this period naturally rested on President Obama's farewell speeches, emotional goodbyes, and moments of reflection, the deeper story unfolding behind the scenes involved the meticulous, deliberate, and highly coordinated efforts to ensure that the incoming administration could assume its responsibilities without disruption. This transition did not occur merely because the Constitution demands it. It unfolded with a level of professionalism rooted in the belief that democracy depends not on individual leaders, but on the seamless transfer of authority from one elected government to the next. The final week offered a window into the gravity of this responsibility and the reverence with which President Obama and his team approached it. From the outset of his presidency, Obama emphasized that no office, not even the presidency, belonged to an individual. Instead, it was entrusted temporarily to those elected to serve, and its long-term legitimacy depended on the peaceful acceptance of electoral outcomes. As the end of his tenure approached, he remained steadfast in honoring this principle. Even in a period marked by intense political polarization, he committed to ensuring that the transition process was carried out with thoroughness and respect. He recognized that the strength of American democracy is not tested when things are calm, but when transitions occur during periods of division. The peaceful transfer of power, therefore, was not just a routine formality, but a reaffirmation of democratic values at a moment when they mattered most. This understanding shaped his actions during the final week, infusing each step with a sense of duty and historical awareness. Inside the White House, the transition process took the form of countless briefings, meetings, and documentation exchanges. These preparations began months earlier, but intensified dramatically during the final week. Every department, from national security to domestic policy, was responsible for assembling detailed reports, summarizing ongoing initiatives, identifying unresolved challenges, and outlining recommendations for the future. These transition books, often hundreds of pages long, were designed to provide the incoming administration with a clear understanding of federal operations. Civil servants and political appointees alike collaborated to ensure accuracy and thoroughness, setting aside personal opinions in favor of institutional preservation. This was one of the most remarkable aspects of the transition. Individuals who had invested years in shaping policy willingly stepped back, prepared to hand their work to successors with potentially different priorities. It was an act of civic duty that demonstrated their respect for democratic succession. National security briefings were among the most critical components of the transition. Given the complexity of global issues and the ever-present risks facing the nation, Obama insisted that these briefings be conducted with utmost precision. The final week saw intelligence officials, military leaders, and national security advisors working around the clock to brief their incoming counterparts. They reviewed everything from counterterrorism strategies and international alliances to cybersecurity, threats, and classified intelligence assessments. Obama, having faced major crises during his tenure, understood how essential it was for the new administration to have immediate and comprehensive knowledge of ongoing operations. A lapse in continuity could jeopardize national security. For this reason, he prioritized an orderly and transparent transition process, recognizing that it was not about politics, but about ensuring that the safety of the nation remained intact. Beyond national security, the transition demanded attention to domestic policy issues, economic management, healthcare operations, environmental protections, regulatory frameworks, infrastructure programs, educational initiatives, and much more. Every federal agency was tasked with summarizing the policies developed over the past 8 years, the data supporting them, and the projected consequences of continuing or discontinuing those efforts. These summaries were not speeches or opinion pieces. They were technical documents crafted to guide future policymakers. The process involved thousands of civil servants who dedicated their final days to writing, editing, and consolidating information. Many of them had been working tirelessly since Election Day, balancing the emotional experience of leaving with the practical need to prepare for the new administration. Their actions reflected a deep sense of patriotism and professionalism, a recognition that their commitment to the country extended beyond personal feelings or political preferences. Amid these logistical and operational tasks, the emotional dimension of the transition revealed itself in quiet but powerful moments. Staff members who had spent years working alongside Obama, often through long nights, crises, legislative battles, and major national milestones, found themselves preparing to exit the White House, packing up their offices, saving digital files, and writing final memos were not merely administrative tasks. They were acts of closure. Many reflected on how their roles had shaped their identities, broadened their worldview, and strengthened their dedication to public service. Even as they prepared to leave, they worked diligently to ensure the incoming teams could succeed. The peaceful transition of power was not simply an institutional ritual. It was carried out by real people whose professionalism and humility formed the backbone of the democratic process. Another vital component of the transition was the interaction between outgoing and incoming staff. While political tensions ran high in the country, the atmosphere inside the White House was grounded in courtesy and cooperation. Outgoing staff members walked their successors through office layouts, explained long-standing procedures, clarified the history of ongoing projects, and answered questions about everything from routine protocols to major policy decisions. These exchanges required patience, respect, and a willingness to set aside personal political beliefs. What made them meaningful was the recognition that the functioning of government depended not on ideology, but on operational knowledge. Staffers on both sides understood that effective governance required continuity, and continuity required collaboration. This sense of shared responsibility for the nation's well-being underscored the quiet nobility of the transition process. One of the most symbolic aspects of the peaceful transition was the preparation of the White House itself. As the Obamas prepared to leave, resident staff coordinated the enormous task of readying the home for the next first family. This transformation occurs in a matter of hours on Inauguration Day, a logistical marvel involving movers, electricians, ushers, decorators, and numerous others whose work remains largely unseen by the public. The staff members who carry out these tasks serve administrations across decades and view their roles as guardians of the institution. Their work during the transition exemplifies stability in its purest form. Regardless of political changes, they carry out their responsibilities with discipline and professionalism. Their presence is a reminder that the White House is more than a symbol of political power. It is a living institution maintained by people committed to preserving its integrity. Throughout the week, Obama reiterated the value of democratic norms in speeches, interviews, and private conversations. He emphasized that the peaceful transfer of power is essential for maintaining trust between citizens and the government. Without it, democratic systems begin to falter. His message echoed the commitments of previous presidents who, regardless of political disagreement, revered the tradition of orderly succession. In doing so, Obama aligned himself with a lineage of leaders who understood that democracy is fragile and must be nurtured through responsible action. His calm and composed tone during the transition was an example of leadership guided by principle rather than emotion. He conveyed the importance of respecting the will of the voters and upholding the legitimacy of the electoral process, even in moments of personal or political disappointment. The episode highlights Obama's understanding that the transition was also a teaching moment for the American public. At a time when many citizens felt uncertain about the future, he sought to convey confidence in the resilience of American institutions. He reminded the nation that democracy is not defined by unanimity, but by the peaceful transfer of authority between differing viewpoints. He urged Americans to remain engaged in civic life, to uphold their responsibility as citizens, and to protect the principles that underpin the nation's governance. His reassurance was not merely rhetorical. It reflected his faith in the ability of the country to weather periods of division and emerge stronger through collective effort. The transition process also illuminated the inherent humility required of leaders leaving the presidency. The farewell week showed Obama stepping aside with grace, acknowledging that leadership must eventually be passed to others. This humility stood in contrast to the immense power he wielded during his tenure. His willingness to relinquish authority peacefully affirmed his respect for democratic norms and his understanding of the presidency as a temporary stewardship. The episode subtly captures how this humility permeated the actions of his team as well. They did not view the transition as the end of their influence, but as a continuation of their service in a different form, one that involved preparing others to lead. In addition to practical preparations, the transition had a profound symbolic dimension that played out in ceremonial moments. These included meetings between the outgoing and incoming presidents, guided tours for incoming staff, and the formal exchange of letters between leaders. The private letter Obama left for his successor, which every modern president writes, symbolized continuity amid change. Though the contents remain confidential, such letters traditionally express goodwill, guidance, and reflections on the responsibilities of the office. This ritual reinforces the idea that the presidency, despite political shifts, embodies a shared commitment to the nation's welfare. As the week drew to a close, the peaceful transition of power came to embody the spirit of the entire Obama presidency, grounded in dignity, institutional respect, and a profound belief in the promise of democracy. Every action taken during those final days reflected an unwavering commitment to ensuring the stability of the nation. The episode makes it clear that the transition was not merely a bureaucratic exercise, but a solemn responsibility carried out with care, compassion, and a deep appreciation for the historical significance of the moment. Ultimately, the peaceful transition captured in West Wing Week 01/19/17 becomes a testament to the values that sustain the nation. It showcases the importance of continuity, the professionalism of public servants, the humility of leadership, and the resilience of democratic institutions. It demonstrates that democracy is upheld not by grand gestures alone, but by countless deliberate actions performed with integrity and purpose. Through its portrayal of a seamless and respectful transfer of authority, the episode serves as a reminder that leadership is defined not only by how one governs, but also by how one steps aside. And in those final days, as binders were passed to successors, offices were cleared, and long-serving staff members took their final walks through historic corridors, the peaceful transition of power stood as an enduring affirmation of the nation's democratic character.